Donald Trump's first official act of 2026 was to invade the country of Venezuela and kidnap Nicolas Maduro and put him on trial in New York.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transitions.
But lest anyone thinks that this has come out of nowhere, in this video I'm going to show you how this has actually been Putin's plan to trade Venezuela for Ukraine since at least 2019. And I know this for a fact because in October 2019, Fiona Hill, a British foreign affairs advisor, testified at Trump's impeachment hearing that Russia had been offering this exact deal for years.
Has been quite explicit about these moves, as well as about the ideas of deploying new nuclear weapon systems to the Caribbean under some recent commentary out of Moscow. And this whole goal here seems to be to undermine the current international order, or at least to show an intent to do so, as a gambit to get the United States to the negotiating table.
I scoured the internet for a full recording of Hill's testimony, but it appears to have actually sort of disappeared off the internet, or maybe it happened behind closed doors. However, a written transcript does survive, and I'm going to read you a little part of it because it breaks down exactly what they were negotiating for. We were having a standoff over Venezuela, and the Russians at this particular juncture were signaling very strongly that they wanted to somehow make some very strange swap arrangement between Venezuela and Ukraine. In other words, if we were going to exert some semblance of the Monroe Doctrine of, Russia keeping out of our backyard, because this is, after all, the Russians, they'd sent in these 100 operatives essentially to basically secure the Venezuelan government and preempt what they were obviously taking to be some kind of U.S. military action. They were basically signaling that you have your Monroe Doctrine, you want us out of your backyard. Well, we have our own version of this. You're in our backyard in Ukraine. Her mention of the Monroe Doctrine is particularly relevant because that's exactly what Trump mentioned in his press conference the day after he arrested Maduro.
The Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know.
Wait, did he just call it the Donroe Document? Anyway, on December 28th, 2025, just a week before the Venezuela operation, Trump and Zelensky met at Mara-Lago. At the press conference afterwards, Trump said that he had a private conversation with Putin just before talking with Zelensky.
We've had discussions on just about every subject, and that includes with President Putin before.
Now, we don't know exactly what they talked about because obviously those transcripts aren't released, but it would seem that his next big actions would have to do with that meeting, which in this case was invading Venezuela. Now, it's worth noting that the Trump administration did everything that it could to prevent Hill from testifying in 2019. They even used the White House legal team to threaten her for violating executive privilege by discussing diplomatic cables, but she testified anyway. Now, it's easy to get confused with this timeline, so I'll remind you that the entire reason that Hill was testifying at all was because in July 2019, Trump called Zelensky on the phone and demanded that he smear Joe Biden in advance of the 2020 election, or he would withdraw his defense guarantees that he had offered Ukraine after Russia's 2014 invasion. Now, that was a ploy that Zelensky wisely refused. Over 446 pages of testimony, Hill mentions Venezuela in relation to Ukraine on 10 different occasions. So it's clear that this plan, it was always on the table. Now you may wonder why the United States would be interested in an arrangement like this at all. Why would America want to trade a global presence for regional dominance? Well, Trump, he's obviously close with Putin.
And I spoke with President Putin. I got along with him very well.
For all his claims to be a master of the art of the deal, his foreign policy since his first term has mostly simply parroted Russian interests. I'm going to paraphrase Heather Cox Richardson here. According to special counsel Robert Mueller's report on Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, in the summer of 2016, Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, discussed with his business partner, who was a Russian operative, a backdoor means for Russia to control eastern Ukraine, also called the Donbas. According to the Republican-dominated Senate Intelligence Committee, the plan was for Trump to say that he wanted peace in Ukraine and for him to appoint Manafort to be a, quote, special representative to manage the process. With the cooperation of the Russian and Russian-backed Ukrainian officials, Manafort would help create an autonomous republic in Ukraine's industrialized eastern region and work to have Russian-backed Yanukovych, for whom Manafort had worked previously, the elected head of the republic. According to the Senate Intelligence Committee, the men continued to work on what they called the Mariupol plan, at least until 2018. Now, Putin has been determined to control that land ever since. And now it appears that Trump is pushing to deliver it. The Mariupol plan is the exact same framework of the peace deal that Trump was negotiating with Zelensky at his press conference before the invasion of Venezuela. And Trump declared to a reporter that things were getting a lot closer to resolution at the Zelensky press conference.
We're telling that Ukraine has to give up Donbass. Just very recent statement coming out.
Well, that's what they've been asking for, and there's a dispute about that. So they're going to have to iron that out. That's an issue they have to iron out. But I think it's moving in the right direction.
The events of the last few weeks essentially mean that the U.S. is no longer truly part of NATO, but instead that Trump is positioning himself as a broker between NATO and Russia for his own maximum leverage and profit. This is a complete replacement of the post-World War II's rules-based order, with a new version of what is actually an older order.
Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region.
We are returning to a global stage where regional powers dominate their own spheres of influence. Russia over Eurasia, China in Asia, the EU in Europe, and America with dominion over all of North and South America. In my opinion, this trade does not put America in an overall stronger position. Before Trump, we had global, hegemonic dominion, and the dollar was the world's reserve currency, meaning that we effectively controlled the world economy, even if that control was only indirect and based on the trust that other countries put in us to be a reliable broker. The New World Order is a return to the colonial and imperial roots that America started with. Under Trump, America can use its military might to directly take control of other countries, while withdrawing its support and responsibilities to defending democracies all around the world. This is a return to both the series of coups that we staged throughout South America in the 1950s through the 1980s. And in this world, our wealth is based primarily on military power and our ability to steal from other countries with impunity. In other words, the future of America is a return to the darkest parts of our past. From Fox Swiss Inc. in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates. Thank you so much to my supporters here on Patreon and on Substack and even on YouTube who make this work possible. It means the world to me that you're here. And if you want to get your name on the honor roll, all you need to do is sign up at the links down below. From Foxtopus Inc. in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates.